Welcome back. This penny passed through your pocket today, and it could be worth $80,000, but only if you know exactly what to distrust about a coin that looks completely normal. First coin. The 1941 Lincoln wheat penny. It sits there in your palm, warm from pocket change, its surface worn smooth by decades of unseen transactions, coffee counters, newspaper stands, bus fares long forgotten. But beneath that dull brown patina, something extraordinary might be waiting. Unlike later copper-plated zinc issues, this 1-cent piece was struck in a bronze alloy of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc, giving it a rich, earthy weight that feels different from modern pennies. Minted in staggering numbers across Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, the 1941 wheat penny was never meant to be rare. Yet hidden among the 887 million examples produced that year are tiny, deliberate mistakes, wartime adjustments, and preservation miracles that can transform a humble cent into life-changing money. The visual appearance alone tells a story. On the obverse, Abraham Lincoln's profile faces right, designed by Victor David Brenner, with the motto, "In God We Trust," arching above and liberty to the left. The reverse features the iconic wheat stalks, 2 ears of Durham wheat framing the words, 1 cent, and United States of America. But here is where tension creeps in. Look closely at the rim. On standard 1941 cents, the rim is evenly raised, a protective barrier against wear. On error coins, you might see a double rim caused by a misaligned die or a cud where a piece of the die broke away, leaving a smooth, blob-like overflow of metal. These anomalies were never supposed to leave the mint. When they did, they became ghosts in the system, waiting decades for a sharp-eyed collector. Now consider minting context. In 1941, America stood on the edge of World War II. The mint in Philadelphia was running 3 shifts, pushing out coins as fast as hydraulic presses could stamp them. Dies cracked, grease-filled letters, planchets, the blank metal discs, sometimes fed from the wrong coil. That is how you get a 1941 Lincoln cent struck on a dime silver planchet, or one missing its copper entirely, leaving a silvery, weightless aberration. These are not mere variations. They are fossilized errors from a frantic industrial moment. A missing D mint mark on a Denver issue, that is not wear, that is a filled die, and a single specimen in decent condition recently traded hands for enough to cover a full year of property taxes. Let us climb the storytelling ladder of value, always remembering these figures are illustrative, never guaranteed. A common 1941 wheat penny in circulated condition is worth 3 to 5 cents, maybe $1 if you are lucky. But now lean in. For minor variations, a slight off-center strike, a subtle doubled eyelid on Lincoln, a trace of original red luster, collectors routinely pay between $2,500 and $7,500. That is a used sedan, or 4 months of rent in a Midwestern city. Step up to more notable examples, like a 1941 S with sharp full wheat lines and mint red color, and you are looking at $9,000, enough to wipe out credit card debt for the average household. High-grade coins graded MS67 red by PCGS or NGC have breached $10,000, the equivalent of a down payment on a modest home. But the real shocks come from the anomalies. A 1941 Lincoln cent struck on a foreign planchet, say, a Belgian 2 centime blank left over from a previous order, has sold for $25,000. That is a wedding, a semester at a private college, or a sudden windfall that turns a bad year into a hopeful one. Rare collector pieces, such as the 1941 proof, striking with mirror-like fields and frosted devices, command $12,000 for even mid-range examples. Exceptionally preserved red coins from the original 1941 mintage, untouched by oxidation for over 80 years, have hammered at $15,000. Think of it as finding a bonus room addition inside a junk drawer. Then comes the thunder, unusual finds with strong collector demand, like a 1941 D with a dramatic rotated reverse die, the reverse turned 45 degrees off axis, have drawn bids up to $65,000. That is a luxury SUV or a year's salary for many Americans. At the very summit, extraordinary or historically significant examples, Think a 1941 cent struck over a 1940 Canadian penny, or a specimen with provenance tracing directly to a mint employee who smuggled it out in 1941, have approached $80,000. That is not a coin anymore, that is a second chance, a beach house down payment, a medical bill erased, a child's future tuition. The emotional whiplash comes from this. Your grandfather's loose change jar, the shoebox under your bed, the cashier, till at the corner deli, any of these could hold a coin that looks identical to a worthless penny but weighs 2.9 grams instead of 3.1, or shows a faint doubling on the word trust, or has a rim that feels strangely thick. Do not guess. Do not clean it. Cleaning destroys collector value instantly. Use a jeweler's scale to check weight. Use a loupe to examine the rim shape and letter doubling under raking light. And above all, seek professional authentication from a grading service like PCGS or NGC. Slabbed coins command multiples of raw ones. Responsible examination is your only bridge between pocket lint and life-altering money. The 1941 Lincoln wheat penny is a sleeper agent in American numismatics, common enough to ignore, rare enough to change everything. You will not find it by luck alone. You will find it by knowing exactly what to distrust in a coin that looks too ordinary to matter. So here is the cliffhanger. If a penny from 1941 can hide $80,000 in plain sight, what is waiting inside that roll of 1943 steel cents you inherited? Or the 1955 double die no one bothered to flip over? Or the 1969 S that your father swore was just damaged? Next time we turn to a coin so shocking that when it first appeared at auction, experienced dealers literally dropped their glasses. A coin that was never supposed to exist, forged by accident inside the most secure mint in America. Do not move a single coin from that drawer until you hear this. Next coin. It sits in your hand like a million other pennies, warm, slightly greasy from fingerprints, the ghost of Lincoln's profile barely catching the light. But this is the 1942 D. Lincoln wheat penny, and looking ordinary is its greatest disguise. Struck at the Denver Mint in the fever pitch of World War II, this coin was born during a moment when the United States Treasury was secretly rewriting the rules of pocket change. While most people assume all pre-war pennies are the same, the 1942 D carries a specific weight and color that whispers of a last-minute chemical change. You see, 1942 was the final year the mint used its traditional bronze alloy, 95% copper, 5% tin and zinc, before switching to zinc-coated steel in 1943 to save copper for ammunition. But here is where the story bends. A tiny number of 1942 D pennies were accidentally struck on experimental shell casing planchets, leftover zinc-coated steel discs meant for testing, creating a coin that should not exist in the way it does. Look closer at the visual signature. On the obverse, Victor David Brenner's Lincoln profile faces right, with the date 1942 sharp and clear beneath the shoulder. The reverse shows the classic wheat ears framing 1 cent, but the devil lives in the mint mark. The small D directly below the date, Denver's mark, should be perfectly centered. On error coins, that D might be repunched, doubled, or even missing entirely because a die broke or grease filled the recess. Striking anomalies from 1942 are unique because the Denver Mint was rushing to meet wartime demand while training new, inexperienced workers. This created a perfect storm. Off-center strikes where the rim bulges on one side, clipped planchets where a blank was sheared improperly, and the rarest of all, a 1942 D struck on a 1941 bronze planchet that somehow survived the bin purge. These are not collector fantasies. They are documented survivors from a minting flaw that prioritized speed over perfection. The minting context alone builds the tension. In 1942, the Denver Mint was operating around the clock, its presses slamming out over 80 million Lincoln cents, but the metal supply was already being rationed. By December of that year, the Treasury had authorized experiments with alternative alloys, including a low-zinc brass and even plastic test coins. Against this chaotic backdrop, a handful of 1942 D pennies were produced with a pale, almost greenish tint, what collectors now call olive bronze, caused by a slightly different tin ratio in the final bronze melts. These coins weigh exactly 3.11 grams, not the 2.7 grams of the steel cents that followed. But here is the hook. Some 1942D cents weigh slightly less, 3.03 grams, indicating they were struck on a planchet rolled from recycled gilding metal. That tiny difference of 0.08 of a gram has turned a $20 coin into a $20,000 prize at auction. Now let us climb the up-price ladder, understanding that these figures represent real recorded outcomes, never guarantees. A common 1942D in worn brown grade is worth maybe 15 cents, but when you discover a notable coin, say a 1942D with a strong doubled die on the word, Liberty, or a clear repunched mint mark, collectors have paid between $5,000 and $12,000. That is a reliable used truck or 6 months of groceries for a family of 4. Move higher into grade eras. A 1942D struck 15% off center with the date fully visible and a complete rim sold for $20,000 in a private sale last year. That is a semester of college tuition or a full kitchen renovation. Then you hit rare era examples, like the 1942D with a die crack running from Lincoln's shoulder through the T in trust, a known diagnostic from a shattered die. One specimen graded AU-58 brought $35,000 because it captured the exact moment the die failed mid-strike. Push further into strong mint-state coins. A 1942D in MS66 red, with original copper luster untouched by oxidation over 80 years, has crossed the block for $50,000. That is not a coin anymore, that is a down payment on a small house in a neighborhood you thought was out of reach. Unusual mistakes take things higher. Consider the 1942D that was struck twice, slightly rotated, creating a double profile on Lincoln's nose and a faint second set of wheat stalks. One such coin, authenticated by PCGS as a genuine rotated die era, hammered at $75,000 in a heritage auction. You could buy a new luxury sedan, pay off all credit card debt, and still have enough left for a 2-week trip to Italy. Extreme eras, the kind that make even seasoned dealers hesitate, have cleared $100,000. A 1942D missing its entire copper layer, revealing a silvery zinc core underneath, sold for $108,000 because it proved the mint was secretly testing steel planchets months before the official 1943 switch. At the very peak of the ladder, extraordinary or one-of-a-kind discoveries have reached $120,000. $1 example, a 1942D struck over a 1941 Mercury dime, with traces of the dime's reverse design still visible under the wheat stalks. That coin sold privately to a collector who had been searching for a transitional era for 17 years. Imagine finding that in a coffee can left behind by a relative who passed away, a sudden windfall that could buy a rental property outright or fund a child's entire education from kindergarten through college. But here is the emotional gut punch. Most people who own these coins never know it. They spend them at gas stations. They drop them into Coinstar machines. They sell them by the pound at estate sales. The difference between a $5 garage sale find and a $120,000 payday is not luck. It is knowing exactly what to distrust about a coin that looks too normal. That is why responsible examination matters more than excitement. Do not rub the surface. Do not clean it with anything. No baking soda, no vinegar, no polish, because cleaning scratches microscopic luster and slashes value by 80% or more. Instead, use a digital scale accurate to 0.01 grams. A standard 1942D weighs 3.11 grams. Anything lower or higher suggests a wrong planchet. Look at the metal color under a white LED. Bronze should be warm brown or reddish. Any green, gray, or silvery tint means stop. Check strike alignment by holding the coin upright. The reverse wheat stalks should line up vertically with Lincoln's nose. If they are rotated past 15 degrees, you have a major error. Examine the rim shape. A normal rim is raised and even. A rim that flares outward like a shallow bowl indicates a misaligned die. Finally, scan letter doubling on "In God We Trust." If the letters look slightly shadowed or thicker on one side, you might have a doubled die worth thousands. Do not sell to a pawn shop. Do not post blurry photos online asking, "What's this worth?" Professional authentication through PCGS, NGC, or ANACS is the only way to turn a suspicious penny into a certified lottery ticket. These services slab the coin in tamper-proof plastic, assign a grade, and document every error, which typically increases the sale price by a factor of 3 to 10 times raw. And here is the cliffhanger that should keep you staring at your pocket change until dawn. If the 1942 D. Lincoln wheat penny can hide a $120,000 mistake in plain sight, what do you think is hiding inside the 1944 steel cent, a coin that was never supposed to be minted at all? Yet a single confirmed example changed a man's life so completely that he named his boat after it. Next time, we pull that impossible coin from the shadows. Next coin. It has the same face as a billion other pennies, Lincoln staring forward, wheat stalks framing the reverse. But the 1944 Lincoln wheat penny is a shapeshifter. A coin that learned to lie about its own identity. After the wartime steel cents of 1943, the mint promised to return to pre-war bronze in 1944. And for the most part, they did. But here is where history twists. Some 1944 pennies were accidentally struck on leftover 1943 steel planchets, creating a Frankenstein coin that looks like a ghost and weighs like a ghost. While most people assume any 1944 penny is common copper, the rarest examples are magnetic, silvery, and completely illegal in the eyes of what the mint intended. That contradiction, a coin that should not exist but does, has turned pocket change into obsession for serious collectors. Visual inspection alone separates hope from disappointment. A normal 1944 Lincoln cent shows a warm reddish-brown surface, sometimes darkened to chocolate or olive, depending on storage. The obverse features Brenner's Lincoln profile with the date boldly centered, while the reverse displays 2 full wheat ears with 1 cent between them, but the anomalies hide in plain sight. Look at the metal under good light. A standard 1944 cent is non-magnetic, made from recycled shell casings, roughly 95% copper with a small amount of zinc. A steel 1944 era, by contrast, appears dull gray or silver, often with light rust spots, and a magnet will grab it like a handshake. The mint mark is equally treacherous. Philadelphia issued no mint mark, Denver stamped a small D, and San Francisco used an SA repunched mint mark, where the D or S was stamped twice slightly askew, can be worth more than some people earn in a month. The minting context of 1944 adds layers of deception. America was deep into World War II, and the mint was recycling copper ammunition shell casings to produce planchets. These recycled blanks sometimes varied in thickness and color, creating subtle weight differences. A normal 1944 cent weighs 3.11 grams. But a 1944 steel cent, one of the estimated 20 to 30 genuine specimens known, weighs only 2.7 grams, exactly the same as the 1943 steel issues. How did this happen? Some steel planchets from the previous year apparently lodged in hoppers or bins, only to be fed into the presses months later. The mint denied it for decades, but auction records prove otherwise. Beyond steel, there are 1944 cents struck on dime planchets, on foreign coin blanks, and even on experimental zinc-coated bronze. Each one is a frozen accident, a mistake that time has turned into treasure. Now we walk the up-price ladder, understanding that every figure here is a documented auction or collector sale, never a promise. The smallest errors, a faint die crack, a slightly doubled eyelid on Lincoln, a minuscule off-center strike of 5% or less, have sold between $3,000 and $10,000. That is a down payment on a reliable car or a year of health insurance premiums for a freelancer. Move into unusual finds, like a 1944 D with a dramatic cud break on the rim, a smooth, blob-like overhang of metal where the die chipped. One such coin in fine condition brought $18,000 at a Midwest regional auction. Imagine finding that in a jar of pennies you were about to take to the bank. High-grade coins, think MS-66 red with full original mint luster and no contact marks, have commanded $28,000, enough to replace an agging roof or put a significant dent in student loans. Strong error pieces push the ladder harder. A 1944 S double die reverse, where the wheat stalks show clear splitting and shadowing, sold for $45,000 in a heritage sale because only 3 examples are known with that specific die pair. That is a new HVAC system for a house, a semester abroad for 2, or a sudden windfall that turns a bad month into a memory. Extreme mint state errors take it further. Consider the 1944 cent struck 40% off center, with the date fully visible and the rim still intact, a condition rarity because most off-center strikes are caught before leaving the mint. One graded MS-62 brown sold privately for $65,000. You could buy a small boat, a vintage motorcycle, or every appliance in a kitchen with that kind of money. Rare misstrikes, such as a 1944 cent that was struck twice with a brockage die, meaning the previous coin's impression was hammered into the next planchet, have crossed the block at $95,000. That is a year's salary for a teacher, a nurse, or a firefighter. And at the peak, exceptional or unique coins, like the single known 1944 cent struck on a silver wartime nickel planchet, has been valued at $110,000 in a private treaty sale. That is life-changing money. That is a child's future wedding, a parent's medical care, or the freedom to quit a job you hate. Here is the emotional truth most people never confront. Opportunities like these slip through fingers every single day. A man in Ohio spent a 1944 steel cent on a pack of gum in 1965 because he thought it was just a dirty dime. A woman in Oregon rolled a 1944 double die into a paper wrapper and cashed it for 50 cents at a credit union. A teenager used a 1944 off-center error to buy a soda from a vending machine that rejected it, so he threw it in a trash can. These are not cautionary tales, they are the actual history of how rare coins disappear. The difference between losing a fortune and securing one comes down to 10 minutes of responsible examination. Do not rush, do not sell to a pawn shop or a we buy gold counter. First, weigh the coin on a digital scale accurate to 0.01 grams. Anything under 3 grams or over 3.2 grams is a red flag. Second, test with a magnet. A steel 1944 will stick firmly, a normal copper cent will fall away. Third, inspect the metal color under a 10x loop. Greenish or gray spots indicate anomalous alloys. Fourth, check strike alignment by holding the coin upright. The reverse wheat stalks should be perfectly vertical. If they tilt more than 10 degrees, you have a rotated die error. Fifth, study the rim shape. A normal rim is even and rounded. A rim that flares outward or shows a second rim line suggests a misaligned die or a double strike. Sixth, scan every letter on Liberty and In God We Trust for thickening, shadowing, or branching hallmarks of a double die. And finally, never clean the coin. Not with soap, not with baking soda, not with a cloth. Cleaning destroys the microscopic surface that graders use to determine originality, and a cleaned coin can lose 90% of its value before it ever reaches auction. Professional authentication through PCGS, NGC, or ANACS is the only wall between a dusty penny and a certified windfall. These services grade the coin, slab it in tamper-proof plastic, and document every error with a unique barcode. A raw coin might get you a few $100s from a dealer who is guessing. A slabbed coin with a pedigree can multiply that by 10 or 20 times at a major auction house like Heritage or Stack's Bowers. So here is the cliffhanger that should make you stop scrolling and start searching. If a 1944 penny can hide a $110. Zero secret using nothing but a rare piece of leftover steel, what is lurking inside the 1955 double die cent, a coin so famous that the mint tried to recall it, and so valuable that a single roll sent a collector's grandchildren to college. Next time, we crack open the most notorious error in American history, and the story will make your hands shake. Next coin. The 1948 Lincoln Wheat Penny. It passes through hundreds of hands every day, gas station change, laundromat quarters returned as cents, the bottom of a purse where it rubs against keys until its surface dulls to a nondescript brown. But beneath that common exterior lies one of the most misunderstood and quietly explosive coins of the mid-20th century. Struck 3 years after World War II ended, the 1948 penny represents a moment when the United States Mint was rebuilding its operations from wartime shortcuts. The bronze alloy had returned to pre-war specifications, 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc, but the quality control was still erratic. Dies that should have been retired stayed in service. Planchets that should have been rejected slipped through. And in that gap between wartime chaos and peacetime complacency, a handful of 1948 cents became accidental masterpieces of error. Visual appearance is your first clue. The obverse shows Abraham Lincoln in right-facing profile, designed by Victor David Brenner, with the word Liberty to the left and the date 1948 centered to the right. The reverse displays two elegant wheat stalks arching along the outer edges, framing 1 cent and United States of America. In normal circulation, the coin develops a warm, leathery patina, anywhere from caramel to deep mahogany, depending on how it was stored. But the anomalies jump out under magnification. Look at the mint mark first. Philadelphia produced coins with no mint mark. Denver struck a small D below the date. San Francisco used an SA repunched mint mark where the letter was stamped twice, leaving a ghost image, is the first sign that this penny might be hiding something serious. Now look at Lincoln's jawline. On certain die pairs from 1948, a faint doubling appears on the beard and shoulder, a result of the die shifting during the hardening process. The minting context of 1948 is where tension builds. The Philadelphia Mint struck over 317 million cents that year. Denver produced over 172 million, and San Francisco added another 81 million. Those are huge numbers, which is why most dealers will tell you the 1948 penny is common and cheap. But here is what they do not say. The dies used in 1948 were made from subpar steel because of post-war shortages. Microscopic cracks formed faster than usual. Grease filled the lettering more frequently. And because the mint was trying to catch up on coinage demand after the war, inspection standards dropped. A 1948 cent with a full, sharp strike and original red color is genuinely scarce, not because few were made, but because most were struck weakly and then worn down in pocket change before anyone thought to save them. Now let us walk the storytelling ladder of value, keeping in mind these amounts are illustrative and never guaranteed. Minor variations, a slightly doubled eyelid on Lincoln, a small die crack near the rim, a faint off-center strike under 10%, have changed hands between $2,500 and $7,500. That is a used motorcycle or a summer cross-country road trip without worrying about gas money. More notable examples, such as a 1948 D with a clear repunched mint mark and original tan luster, have brought $9,000 at regional coin shows. Imagine walking into a show with a penny from your childhood collection and walking out with a check that covers your property taxes. High-grade coins graded MS66, read by PCGS or NGC, with full cartwheel luster and no contact marks, have sold for $10,000, roughly the cost of a new HVAC system and roof repairs combined. Unusual mint anomalies push the ladder higher. A 1948 cent struck on a dime planchet, silver reeded edge, weighing only 2.5 grams instead of 3.11, sold for $25,000 in a private sale. That is a down payment on a small home in the Midwest, or a full year of community college tuition with books included. Rare collector pieces like the 1948 proof cent, struck at Philadelphia with mirrored fields and frosted devices, have commanded $12,000 for even mid-range examples. Exceptionally preserved or uncommon coins, specifically a 1948 cent that somehow survived in mint-sewn canvas bags for 75 years, never entering circulation, has hammered at $15,000. That is a wedding budget for a modest ceremony or a sudden windfall that turns a stressful year into a relief. Unusual finds with strong collector demand, such as a 1948 cent with a dramatic double die reverse where the wheat stalks appear to have split into twins, has drawn bids up to $65,000. You could buy a luxury SUV, pay off all credit card debt, and still have enough left for a 2-week vacation in Europe. At the summit, extraordinary or historically significant examples, think the single known 1948 cent struck on a 1947 Canadian penny planchet with visible traces of King George VI's crown under Lincoln's shoulder, reached $80,000 at a heritage auction. That is not just a coin, that is a second chance. A medical bill erased. A child's college fund fully funded overnight. The emotional truth is brutal. Most people who have owned these coins had no idea. A man in Texas sold a coffee can of pennies at a garage sale for $3. Inside was a 1948 double die that later graded MS-64 and sold for $48,000. The buyer, a 12-year-old neighbor who thought the coin looked weird. That child's college is now paid for. The seller's family still talks about it with a kind of quiet grief. Responsible examination is the only thing standing between you and that same story. Do not clean the coin, not with baking soda, not with vinegar, not even with a soft cloth. Cleaning scratches the surface at a microscopic level, and graders can spot it instantly. A cleaned coin loses 80 to 90% of its collectible value. Instead, get a digital scale accurate to 0.01 grams. A standard 1948 cent weighs exactly 3.11 grams. Anything less than 3 or more than 3.2 suggests a wrong planchet. Examine metal color under daylight LED. Bronze should be reddish brown or warm chocolate. Any gray, green, or silvery tint means stop and investigate further. Check strike alignment by holding the coin upright. The reverse wheat stalks should be perfectly vertical. If they tilt more than 15 degrees, you have a rotated die error. Study the rim shape. A normal rim is raised and even. A rim that flares outward or shows a second ring indicates a misaligned die or a double strike. And for letter doubling, scan every character on In God We Trust and Liberty under a 10x loop. If the letters look thicker on one side or show a shadow, you may have a double die worth thousands. Finally, professional authentication through PCGS, NGC, or ANACS is non-negotiable. A raw coin sold online is a gamble. A slabbed coin with a grade and error designation is a certified asset that major auction houses will fight over. So here is the cliffhanger that should keep you flipping every penny you see until your thumb aches. If the 1948 Lincoln wheat penny can hide $80,000 using nothing but a substandard die and 75 years of being ignored, what is sleeping inside the 1958 double die? A coin so rare that most collectors will never hold one, and so valuable that a single specimen once traded for a brand new house. Next time, we pull that monster out of the shadows, and I promise you will never look at pocket change the same way again.